Welcome to the Physical Product Movement, a podcast by Fiddle. We share stories of the world's most ambitious and exciting physical product brands to help you capitalize on the monumental change in how, why, and where consumers buy. I'm your host, Ken Ojuka. Today, I had the opportunity to interview Nona Lim, founder and CEO of Nona Lim, a fresh, modern, and clean label Asian CPG brand. Nona is a wonderful guest with a deep knowledge of operations and distribution in the CPG space. They distribute their Asian food line of products through Whole Foods, Kroger, Costco, and many other stores. They were recently crowned winner of the Kroger's Go Fresh and Local competition, a huge deal. Nona tells a story of going from competing professionally in fencing and almost making the Olympics to moving to San Francisco and launching a meal kit delivery business well before they were popular, and how that motivated her to productize some of her dishes, which eventually became the CPG brand. Nona talks about some of the supply chain challenges every brand is facing right now due to the COVID pandemic and how they are shifting things in their business to deal with some of these challenges. She talks about the criteria that she uses to figure out whether to manufacture some of her products in-house while continuing to use co-packers for other product lines. It's a really valuable crash course from a successful and experienced entrepreneur. I think you'll enjoy the interview. All right, Nona, thank you for jumping on with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast. I know you're busy, I'm busy, and we've kind of had a hard time, syncing up, but I'm glad that we're finally here.
Absolutely. We made it happen.
Well, I've been looking forward to talking to you. I think you've got a unique brand and a great story, and we definitely want to dig into it. But first, we wanted to start with a quote. Is there a quote that comes to mind that, you like to live by, or just something that you like to keep in mind?
This is a quote that I've been reflecting on a lot more this last 2 years. And this is actually something from Proverbs. It's called, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he shall direct your paths. The funny thing is that I've not been spiritual or religious for the last 2 decades, and I still don't consider myself religious at this point. But it's something that I've really been thinking a lot about, especially, with all the upheavals that have happened in the last few years. It just reminded me that being an entrepreneur, there's just so many unknowns, so many things that are outside of my control. Like nobody, well, most people, I certainly didn't forecast the pandemic, right? Or the supply chain impacts and everything. And so that's something that I kind of lean on sometimes when I feel that there's so many things that I just don't have in control, which is very, very different from my previous career prior to becoming an entrepreneur when I was a consultant, where I felt that I had the smarts and have the capabilities to figure things out and get things done. So I think that, being an entrepreneur is quite a humbling experience at times, and those verses have kind of kept me going.
Yeah, I love those verses. And, I think that even if you're not religious, I think that, being an entrepreneur, there's a certain level of faith and just, sort of just faith in the future that things will work out and that you will figure it out, and that things will be okay. So,
Absolutely.
I think that's great. Yeah, the uncertainty, especially of these last couple of years, has been kind of rough. And I could see how those words can kind of anchor you a little bit. So. Well, let's talk about this previous career and, just a little bit about your background, and obviously we're hearing an accent. So where are you from and what did you do before you launched your brand?
I know, right? Sometimes it's almost kind of like, what is it, a microaggression to say, where are you from? Where are you really from? But in this instance, it is absolutely legitimate because I did grow up in Singapore. That's where I grew up and went to school there, and actually moved to the Bay Area only in 2005. So I grew up in Singapore and then spent 8 years working in London. And that was in management consulting, and then after that, software consulting.
Yeah. And did you pick up an accent when you were in London as well, or no?
No, probably bits and pieces. Like Singapore, we were ex-British colony. And so, a lot of the words maybe sounds a bit more British, like the vase instead of vase,
Yeah, yeah.
and probably 8 years in London, I've picked up a little bit here and there. And so I think I just have just such a random accent now. But if you've ever been to Singapore or you have friends who are Singaporean, you probably you'll be able to tell them either from Singapore or Malaysia.
Got it. Okay. And so what kind of consulting did you say that you were doing?
So I was a management consultant. And then after that, during the whole dot-com boom time, I went into software consulting. So we would be building all this, first generation large e-commerce platforms for kind of a big companies back then. And I was a project manager, an account manager. And I think those skills came in very handy when it comes to project management.
Okay, got it. And was that the connection to the Bay Area then?
Well, the connection a little bit, which is my husband, whom I met in management consulting, was also with me in London, and he wanted to move back to the US, and he wanted to basically go back into management consulting, but for the tech companies. And so the Bay Area is the perfect location for him. And so I gave up my kind of career in London and moved to the Bay Area, and it was like a brand new country, a brand new beginning.
And I read a little bit on your bio that you were into fencing and that you were fencing competitively. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. So when I first moved to the Bay Area, I picked up competitive fencing. So I used to do it in Singapore in high school and college, but with a different weapon. And so I picked it up again right before moving to the Bay Area. And when I was trying to figure out what to do next, when we first moved here, I started fencing competitively and represented Singapore in fencing. And
Wow.
and I almost made the 2012 London Olympics.
Oh, very cool. Okay. So you weren't just dabbling, you were pretty good.
Yeah, I was kind of a semi-professional, but not quite professional compared to, all the, the Russian, the Korean, or the Chinese athletes who would train, 3 times a day, 6 days a week. I wasn't training quite at that level. I was probably more training about 4 or 5 days a week in the evenings while still trying to run a startup.
Got it. So yeah, so let's connect the dots then. So you moved to San Francisco and you're fencing. What led to launching your brand?
Yeah, so while I was fencing, I came up with what I thought was a great idea. So in 2006, I started the first meal kit delivery business. So technically, I created that category. It was before like HelloFresh, Blue Apron, and all the rest. But I was kind of doing it as a side hustle, so it was very localized. I didn't go out and fundraise, and we grew that business to, I would say, like a 7-digit figure business for about 6-7 years. Fast forward to the London Olympics, missed getting into it by one point. I gave up fencing, had a baby instead in 2013, and then decided to, really look at where my business is at. And at that point in time, I kind of figured out that, I don't know how scalable and sustainable / profitable that business is going to be, given the high customer acquisition costs, the churn rates, the logistics costs, so on and so forth. So I basically kind of pivoted and then launched the CPG business in 2014. And that's how the Nona Lim brand was born.
Okay. And so were you doing similar types of food when you were doing the meal kit delivery business?
Actually it was quite different. I would say that the pillars that drive my R&D have always been the same, which is, how can I create product that tastes amazing, number one. Number two is healthier, much better for you. And number three is much more convenient. So literally when I first started, my meal kits would be, things like wild Alaskan salmon with miso dressing and soba noodles, right? So there was still kind of the Asian inflection in the menu because of my palate. And then I even created a food-based detox program that was based on taking out all the common food allergens. So, but it was much kind of broader, I would say, menu selection. I had a whole bunch of Asian stuff. I have some more Californian cuisine. And then what happened is in 2014, when I first launched the CPG brand, I took some of the snacks, which were soups in the program, and launched with those because those had the best shelf life. And then what happened was Whole Foods reached out to me, or rather, I started pretty early on working with Whole Foods in a very small capacity by connecting with the local forager back then, just in the Bay Area. And after working with them for a year or so, they reached out and said, hey, we really would like to get some fresh Asian noodles into Whole Foods. We like what we see in some of the Asian supermarkets, but it's not quite clean label. Is there something you could do for us? And so that was when I really kind of collaborated with Whole Foods and actually brought the very first fresh rice noodles into Whole Foods, into kind of the natural grocery world, and then progressed from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. What kind of snacks were you selling before
So those snacks were those like soups, like my carrot ginger soup, or the tomato Thai basil, right? So I had a bunch of soups, healthy soups that were gluten-free, vegan. So those were the ones that I launched with initially. Okay. And a couple of those are still, products that we carry today. And then after that, when I launched the rice noodles, I felt that it might not be as accessible, for mainstream Americans to know what to do with rice noodles. And so then I created a bunch of Asian bone broths to go with it back in 2014, like a coconut lime bone broth, which is really modeled after the Thai tom kha soup, right? We had a Vietnamese pho bone broth. Right, so I wanted to make it easy for consumers to enjoy at home. And that was back in 2014, 2015. So that was way before kind of the whole bone broth craze.
Right. Okay, so obviously, you've had quite a bit of success. You've been able to get into distribution, not only in Whole Foods, but you're in Target. I believe I read that you're in Costco as well. What are some of the other retailers that you work with?
We work with a lot of natural independents as well, like Buy Right, Berkeley Bowl, the regional chains like Fresh Time, Fresh Market, Wegmans. And then we also worked in the last 3 years with a lot of the online grocery delivery partners, like the Imperfect Foods of the World or Fresh Direct or Good Eggs. And most recently was super excited that we won a competition that Kroger had, what they call a Go Fresh and Local Accelerator Program.
Tell us about that a little bit. That's a big deal. That's not a small thing.
It's super exciting because over 1,000 brands applied for that program, and this cuts across everything that is fresh, right? So they were looking at everything from deli to bakery to specialty, like all the cheeses and all the meats, to the pasta category, to produce category. So just lots of different, basically every single category that is fresh. And that's why so many brands applied for it. And we were one of the finalists and went to Kroger for a pitch competition, kind of like very Shark Tank-like. And we were one of the 5 winners. It's super exciting because one of the challenges that we've had in the past has always been around where do you find our products, and that's always kind of the challenge of being an innovator. Right. when we're so innovative and we create a brand new category, we become a category of one, right? So when you're a category of one, which reset do you go to? Which buyer do you go to? And so I think that Kroger really recognizes that our products are innovative and also are very much on trend, especially at the intersection of many major trends, whether it is around fresh as a growing trend, cooking at home continuing to be a huge trend even after the pandemic, or, finally the rising trend in the last few years in the popularity of Asian flavors and Asian foods. And so they really embraced us. And so to win that competition is just such a good affirmation.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And so what does that mean for your business? After you win this competition, does it open any doors or, what does it do?
Yeah. It gives us the, access to all 2,000 Kroger stores, to work with them, not just on distribution, but also to work with them on thoughtful merchandising location, which is key for a product to be successful. And it comes with a lot of the marketing opportunities as well, to be highlighted and featured, whether it is in their magazine or social media or email marketing. All of those make a huge difference, right? To small brands that cannot really afford to spend a lot in their marketing programs to start with. All of those, I think brand awareness is just the biggest thing that you could do to help a small brand, especially for us, because when we've had customers try our products, they we almost always convert them, and and our repeat purchase is really high. Our challenge in the past has always been, how do we make sure that the consumer know that we exist, right? So
Right.
I think that winning this competition, to make sure that we're placed in the right place and to have the marketing support behind it, it just increases so much our chances of success at Kroger.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was what, about a month ago?
Yeah, that was about a month and a half ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. Yeah, so let's talk just a little bit about the supply chain issues that you talked about at the top of the show. I guess like everybody else, you're experiencing some of the challenges that go with all the supply chain issues, right? And so maybe you can double click on that. Tell us a little bit about how it's been for your company and, some of the things that you're doing about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone is facing the same challenges, right? Anything ocean freight, has been, first of all, ocean freight has gone from things from, we have some noodles that come from Singapore, it's gone from 4 weeks to maybe 8 weeks. At the same time, it's almost impossible to book a container, like literally there's been no vacancy. And then on top of that, prices have easily gone up from $4,000 for a 40-foot refrigerated container to make as much as $20,000 for a
Right.
40-foot container, right? So you have all of those challenges, which is, delayed timing, increased cost, just availability. And this translates into not just, increased costs, but also the strain on working capital and then our fill rate as well, right? So all of those things are just huge impact on us. And then domestically, there are increased costs in materials as well, right? With paper costs going up, there's a national paper shortage right now, which impacts packaging. And LTL is also quite a nightmare where, we have had some instances where our carriers would have a moratorium going into the lanes on the East Coast. Like literally, they're not accepting any more loads, right? So how are we going to deliver to our distributors on the East Coast? So all of those have been, I would say, front and center, and takes up a big part of my attention to make sure that we can navigate through all of these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's a struggle and everybody, I think, is doing the best that they can. So it looks like you guys raised some money a little bit earlier this year. Was it in part motivated by some of these supply chain issues?
Um, Actually, we've raised back in 2017 to help fuel the growth, and then we've raised some, over the years with convertible notes mostly from existing investors to help manage all of that, right? I think we've really used a combination of a few different financing options to really help manage the business. Certainly, I think equity, whether in terms of pure equity or convertible notes, have been an instrument that we've used, but also, AR lending as well, and really working with our AR lender to make sure that, we have access to that capital for working capital purposes has been extremely important. And then finally, I'm just grateful that there have been some of these programs from the government that have also really been impactful for us as well, like the PPP and things like that.
Yeah, looks like maybe my notes are a little bit wrong there. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, so there's obviously all these strains in the supply chain right now. What's your outlook? How do you think this, gets better, or do you see us kind of facing a lot of these challenges for a while to come still?
I've just heard different things from different people, right? It seems as if, some have said that ocean freight, those challenges might go all the way till, Q2 next year. Some have said that it might even go on till, Q1 of 2023. There are many who have said that, prices will probably come down from that crazy high, but it's not going to be as low as where it has been, right? So I think that we're definitely looking at ocean freight as a big piece of it, and also looking at our long-term manufacturing strategy. We do make some of our products in-house in Oakland, California. And so then understanding where we're going to manufacture and how we're going to do that for the long term is something we look at. We've also been, even with our suppliers in Asia, we've been looking at how can we make sure that there's redundancy? How can we make sure that there's additional capacity? So a lot of it, honestly, has been a lot of risk management. This is where my kind of software project management background has come in really helpful, right?
Right.
Really just looking at looking at all the so many different interconnected pieces and just thinking that, pray for the best, but hope for the best, but assume the worst, and really having a lot of plan B and C and D in place just to, in case something falls apart. More often than not, things fall apart in the world of operations. So it's just having a lot of plan B, C's, D's in place.
Okay, got it. And you mentioned that you do manufacture some in-house. Which of your products do you do in-house?
All of our liquid items. So, the bone broth and the soups that you see, whether there's cups or pouches and things like that. So we do all of that in-house.
Okay. And what was what was the impetus for that? I mean, when you launched it, did you think about, I guess, did you originally launch doing it in-house, or did you ever use a manufacturer for that? Or, what were your thoughts about bringing that in-house?
Honestly, because as I mentioned earlier, right, which is I started off with a meal kit delivery business. And so that is something, we had to deal with hundreds of different recipes. There was just so much going on and so much complexity with that business that it's not possible to co-pack with anyone else. And so I've had a facility from that part of the business. And then when we expanded and, launched the soups, which was next on the program, we were already making those, right? But of course, it became much easier to just bring in some secondhand equipment because the soup equipment is not that expensive. And that's why we did it that way. And it was more kind of, I would say, legacy, right, from where the business evolved. We did look in the past, at co-packing a couple of times at different parts of the different times of the business. And we found that it wasn't as cost effective, and we could also maintain the quality and consistency, but I'm not necessarily wedded to making it all myself. I think it all depends, right, on so many different things. When I think about, contract manufacturing versus in-house manufacturing, right, which is
Right.
what is, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe we can double click on a couple of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So what are the factors that you would consider, and what might tip the scale to make you go to a co-packer, or, what might keep you doing it in-house? Because the reason I bring this up is it's something that a lot of people have on their mind, particularly with all the challenges with the supply chain. People are considering, hey, do I need to manufacture this in-house? Do I need to bring this a little closer? So what are some of the things that you consider when making that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the upside of having manufactured, of manufacturing those products in-house during the pandemic was that we were very agile, so that we could really make smaller batches than maybe a typical co-packer would want. And so that we were able to, really manage working capital and just have 3-4 weeks of supply on hand and pivot very quickly based on what's happening in the market. So that was definitely a huge advantage for us, right? But when I look at a product, and if I were to look at it, I was talking to another brand that did maybe plant-based protein items, which is kind of a big trendy thing, right? I look at it in terms of, number one, is there a lot of spare capacity in the market? Right? If there's already a lot of spare capacity in the market, do you want to invest in a lot of that equipment that you need, right, to make it yourself? Because the capital investment could be significant, right? Again, also, like, what is the capital investment needed for your specific product, right? Because certain packaging lines could cost so much money that it might not be worth it. And so, what is the IP, right? What's the technology behind it? Soups actually, it's not that difficult to make, right? Versus something, if you're Beyond Meat or Impossible Foods and you're trying to be at the cutting edge and you're coming up with really specialized, manufacturing processes that co-packers just don't know how to make. And if you consider that to be really a big part of your competitive advantage, you may not want to outsource that to a co-packer. And then, of course, there's always the quality and the consistency, right? If you outsource to a co-packer, can you get the quality and the consistency that you want? And then the pricing as well, like what kind of gross margins can you get, right? It's always a balance of both in terms of gross margin and capital investment, and really measuring those and deciding what works best. And then finally, I think that whether you can find a good co-packer, right? A really good co-packer that you can build a really strong relationship with and have a really good contract in place with. And of course, for co-packer, what are their minimums? Right? Because if they are very high minimums and you have a short shelf life and you don't have yet the distribution, then you're going to end up having a lot of spoils, right?
Right.
So those are some of the things. I think there's just so many different factors that you have to consider, and it's not kind of a magic bullet, answer for every brand. They have to decide based on their own unique circumstances.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. So I guess let's talk about Nona Lim. What's coming up, in the future, rest of the year, coming up? Do you have anything exciting that you could tell us about?
Sure, absolutely. So, this year we launched our stir fry starter kits. We launched them at Kickstarter, and it got funded within a day and was selected by Kickstarter as one of the projects we love. And it's really exciting because they only do that for like 3% of all the projects that they have on their platform. So for us, that was kind of a first good indicator that, there's something in there, right? And the fact that we were able to win the Kroger competition with those products and also got the Costco rotation with one of the SKUs as well has been very affirming, which is we believe that our mission and vision is definitely is definitely resonating with both the industry and with the consumer, which is we want to make fresh Asian products that still taste really awesome, but it's clean label, better for you, and in a way that is accessible for mainstream Americans, right? It's easy for you to put together, for you to have dinner at home. Our goal is to make it every household to have kind of like a noodle night. The way you will have a pizza night on a Friday or you have a taco Tuesday is you should have a noodle night Monday or something like that. And so to that, we're continuing to innovate and create a bunch of different, kits that will allow consumers to easily enjoy any Asian dinners, Asian food at home.
Well, sign me up. That sounds amazing. And I've got 5 kids, and I think all of them would agree, which is pretty hard to do in my household. So
that keeps you busy. I'm impressed.
Well, let's switch to the quick fire round. I've got 4 questions for you, and just tell me kind of the first answer that comes to mind. What is one tool or resource that you feel is invaluable to you?
Gosh. Google Sheets.
It's funny how much that answer comes up. But yes, I agree too, actually, within my business. So what about a book? Do you have a book recommendation that you could make for the audience?
Unfortunately, no, not right now. I've been so mired in crisis management. I've had no time to read.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's skip that one. What about one piece of advice that you could give to your 21-year-old self?
EQ is as important as IQ, if not more important.
That's a good one. Yeah. Who is one person in your field of work that you would love to take to lunch?
Ooh, in my field of work.
Yeah, maybe another entrepreneur or another brand that you can keep an eye on. Is there anybody that you look up to?
Hamdi. I've managed Hamdi from Chobani. I had the privilege of spending an hour with him as part of the one-on-one, as part of the Chobani incubator companies a few years ago. And it's just been such an amazing experience. I would love to take him to lunch.
Cool. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you or your brand, what's the best way to do that?
I'm old-fashioned, so email's the best. Nona@nonalim.com.
Okay. And any parting advice to any other, food entrepreneurs out there that are in the grind, that are trying to grow their brand? What's some parting advice that you would give them?
Oh gosh, your your ability to endure pain will help shape the kind of entrepreneur that you are. So hang in there, and it doesn't matter how successful anyone looks out there. Everyone goes through a ton of pain. You just have to hang in there.
That's great. And that's a good note to end on. It actually reminds me of something that Elon Musk says. He says that an entrepreneur is somebody who enjoys chewing on glass and enjoys the taste of their own blood, right? Like it's just entrepreneurship can be very, very painful. So
absolutely, the highs and the lows.
Yep. And also, the other note, which is incredibly rewarding, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
All right, Nona. Well, thank you for the interview. I think you've been a great guest. I especially appreciate, you talking to us about your supply chain, the way your mindset around the supply chain. And then also, some of your thinking around, whether to bring something in-house and produce it in-house or to use a co-packer. I think that was really, really helpful for the entrepreneurs out there. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Yep. Best of luck. The Physical Product Movement podcast is brought to you by Fiddle. To find out more about Fiddle and how our industry-leading inventory ops platform is giving modern brands and manufacturers full visibility into their inventory and operations, visit fiddle.io. And then make sure to search for Physical Product Movement in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Fiddle, thanks for listening.